The aviation sector, I've got to say, spoke to Alan Joyce a minute ago, seems pretty happy.
OK, yeah, and they are, and there's no doubt. You can hear that also coming out of the banks as well. There's an interesting dilemma for the federal government here, and that was that those who were most affected were particularly in North Queensland, the tourism sector, and the aviation sector as well. And so somehow they didn't want to reward the Palaszczuk government for having closed borders and therefore really having closed down our own tourism businesses. But at the same time, they didn't want to punish those businesses because they were quite clearly going to be very sympathetic towards the Morrison government. And so I put this a little while ago to Josh Frydenberg, and it was interesting because they had to come up with a package that delivered all of this. And so this package today really does allow more people to go to many of those tourism destinations. On top of that, also, the other key was to try and save 8,500 jobs in the international flight area, given the fact that they're not expecting that international borders will open until October, which is a timetable that Alan Joyce himself has put on it. So they've said 8,500 jobs they want to try and save. So they're going to put them on some sort of support package to keep them connected to their jobs and the airlines. I'm working out if it's a current JobKeeper and that's going to extend that and somehow to those workers.
Is this the retention package?
This is the retention package. I think
so. We don't have quite details on that yet.
No, they've said they won't announce it until the budget. But if you work it out, 8,500 jobs, $1,000 a fortnight, it works out to about $120 million that go to the airlines. Okay. So on top of that, they're going to get then this subsidised airline tickets on top, the 800,000 airlines to these regional areas. So that's one of the keys. But then there's a second part about this, and let's see if we bring up the businesses on JobKeeper in the March quarter get further assistance from the government in these loan packages. Okay. But there are 5 criteria here we've got to look at. There's first up the offer of low interest loans. So that's the absolute key. So in other words, if you are on JobKeeper, there's a second part. It's up to $1 million in loan value that these businesses can take out. The loan terms now, will it be extended from 5 years under the current scheme out to 10 years? The next part about it is that there will be a repayment holiday of up to 2 years. Now, the important part about this is under the current scheme that's out there, not many people took it up. It was actually a very small amount of money lent out by the banks. Yeah. So this time around, rather than being guaranteed 50% by the government, these loans will be 80% guaranteed by the government. And so as a result, the banks will be more willing to lend to businesses that right now might struggle or collapse after the JobKeeper scheme ends.
So is that all that's on offer for businesses outside the tourism sector?
Pretty much so, That's right. But they reckon there's around 350,000 businesses that are eligible that might otherwise collapse. And the area that I think is hospitality and certainly restaurants are going to be key areas that could really have suffered in this area. Now, just a few of the bank bosses have been out today talking about this. So say, for example, Peter King is the boss of Westpac. He said the new scheme will provide targeted support and also helps provide a funding bridge to give businesses more time to recover. Then you had Ross McEwen, so he is the boss of the National Australia Bank. He said the longer dated terms, doubling to a maximum 10 years, will be really helpful to businesses that were healthy pre-COVID but struggling in the current conditions. And then Shane Elliott, who is the boss of the ANZ, said the scheme will provide a critical boost to those parts of the economy, particularly in travel and tourism, still doing it tough. So that's where it sits at the moment. Now, you go to Graham Screw Turner, who was the boss of Flight Centre. He said it's inadequate, it's not enough, and it's really disappointing. So in other words, some of those who are travel agents in particular don't think there's enough in all of this. Mind you, you'd hope that some of those 800,000 tickets might actually be booked through his travel agents or other travel agents. And I do note on the stock market today that Flight Centre shares are up by 4% as we sit here and speak. Okay. So there's a decent boost there. Hello World, another travel agent, its shares up by 4% as well. Sydney Airport up 2.8%, Qantas 4%, and also Rex up by 2%. So it's just fascinating to see that the share prices of all these travel stocks have bounced as a result of this announcement today.
Shareholders will be happy at least.
At least for the time being.
And a little bump. Now, before I let you go, these interest-free loans, a holiday for up to 2 years, are businesses going to be able to take that up? Because as you pointed out, the history isn't great. Not many businesses did take up that opportunity, but that's when the government was at a 50% guarantee. Now they're interest-free loans for 2 years. But I guess, you know, some of these businesses have lost like a year of revenue. Their profits are well down. Are they really going to want to take that extra risk, even if they do have to start paying it back in 2 years from now?
So yesterday we heard from the Reserve Bank Governor, who said one of the fundamental problems of Australia right now is that businesses are not investing. So what this is about is to try and give businesses the confidence to go and invest.
Yeah.
However, small question for you. If you had a business that really is now struggling post-COVID and you're not certain whether it's going to survive, would you be happy to lend your money to that business? So the question is, the banks now have got to ask that same question of themselves. If a business looks as though it may have been healthy but now maybe is teetering, are they happy to lend that money? That's the reason why the government has given this 80% guarantee rather than the 50% guarantee. So in other words, if that business goes bust, the government's responsible for 80% of the loss and the bank 20% of the loss, instead of them splitting that 50-50 in the past.
Well, there's a lot on the banks at the moment. I mean,
So
Philip Lowe telling the banks that it's up to the bank to kind of control the housing.
Sure, but the second part about it is post the Royal Commission, these banks, of course, have got to do the national right thing, of course, to make certain that their reputations are enhanced into the future.